Welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Distortion, episode number 334. My name is Brando. Welcome to the podcast, Jennifer Batten. How are
Thanks
you?
for having me.
You look awesome. I had to change my background briefly if you're watching this on YouTube with you and some of your peak hair hair times, but I'm glad that you haven't gotten rid of those days. So I
Not quite. I can't make it look like it did back then. That took 2.5 hours and a professional.
Where are you located right now, if you don't mind me asking?
Portland, Oregon.
Okay. So let me ask, because I'm in Queens right now, Queens, New York. Before the pandemic, I would do a lot of these podcasts out of the iHeart studio in Tribeca. But you're a New Yorker, but that can mean so many different things. So I couldn't find out, where did you grow up? Like, if I can, I'm wondering if our parents were friends. If you can.
Upstate New York near Watkins Glen.
Okay. So that's what I mean. There's a difference between city New York and
Big.
up.
In fact, I never got to New York City until I was with Michael Jackson in 1987, I think. Eight.
See, that's amazing to me. So I guess you've gone through your story before, but I guess not here. How did you go from upstate New York again? That's where I go to visit. That's where it's getting away from it all. There's not a lot of people are real salt of the earth. Like, how did you, I guess, first get into guitar in upstate New York?
Well, it was born from jealousy. My sister had a guitar and I didn't, and that pissed me off. And between that and seeing the Beatles on TV, that was my focus. It's like I was in this tiny town, and everybody, all my friends, were into the Beatles. So anytime a new record came out, that's what we would go to somebody's house and just listen to it and stare at the cover. Old school style, back when we had 3 channels on TV.
And would you believe it that Paul McCartney just announced some dates? So he's touring.
Yeah, that's amazing. I saw his tour in New York. Gosh, maybe 5 years ago, maybe a little longer. And I just will never remember it. In fact, I swore it was my last arena show because there was a family of people singing every song behind my head, uh, right behind me, and they sucked. I mean, it's just so rude when you pay that much money to see somebody, to have somebody ruin the show for you. I'm going, man, never again. So
That's
at
funny.
least I saw him. I'm glad I saw him once.
That's funny. After one of the more recent concerts that I've been to, Guns N' Roses, which may be quite obvious, and I was taping for the podcast, and I can't help but sing along. And watching back, I'm hearing myself. I'm horrendous. I was embarrassed. I'm like, I don't think I can ever sing out loud again. Why didn't whoever I'm with? Why don't they tell me that? Maybe just to whisper it or mime along to it. But uh, regardless, I would love to, if we can just, I guess, speed up to, because I had Michael Jackson's cassettes before I had Guns N' Roses on CDs. I had Dangerous on. I wish I had it with me to show you. It's somewhere in my mom's house, the Dangerous cassette. But I was too young to go to that tour, so I watched a lot of those VHS. That's how I grew up watching you and just thinking like, wow. Because how did that come about? Because and how old were you when that opportunity first came?
I was 29, and he was looking for guitar players. Um, David Williams is somebody that had played with him for years and played on his records, and he was on an extended tour with Madonna. And also, that's how Ricky Lawson got the gig, because Jonathan Moffett, who had been with the Jacksons, wasn't available. He was out with Madonna also. So they needed 2 guitar players, and they auditioned 100 people. And I was lucky enough to hear about the audition. Somebody called Musicians Institute, where I was teaching at the time, and said, we need 2 people. I was one of the lucky ones that got the call. So I took a couple days off and learned a bunch of his songs and went down as prepared as I could be. And there was no band. It was just somebody was shooting video. And the only guidance I was given was to play something funky. So I did that, and then I kind of random improved. Then I played the Giant Steps tapping solo that ended up on my first record, a John Coltrane tune. And then I ended Beat It solo because I had been playing that in a cover band. And I thought he might find that useful. So that bought me a house. Fast forward.
I want to stay though in that 29-year-old mind where where were you? Did you think that this was even like feasible? Like where was your confidence level at that time? Obviously, now you're regarded as one of the greatest guitarists ever, but I
You
think you're
know,
underrated. You're underrated. You're not mentioned enough. That's just kind of, but everybody knows who you are and what you've done. But I guess when you're 29 years old, how did you think of yourself?
I think I was probably a little bit cocky at the time because I was really digging into fusion and jazz and music that was much, much harder than Michael Jackson's music. Um, and then I'm playing with these monsters like Greg Fillinganes and Ricky Lawson and the number one calls for all those kind of tours. Um, and that schooled me in groove. I remember I worked my ass off getting all the parts down and getting them super accurate. And I remember, there's certain moments that stand out in your life that just time stops. And I was even showing Greg Fillinganes the form to Billie Jean because he came in late. He was doing some other projects, and then I don't know, a couple weeks in is when he started. So not like he wasn't a ridiculous quick learner, but I remember once we all got it down, and we were ridiculous amount of hours every single day. He stopped and said, "Okay, I think we got the show down. Now let's focus on groove." And all of a sudden I'm thinking, and I always do this in bands when there's a problem. I go, "Is it me?" you know. But I tell you what, playing with cats at that level for a year and a half, and when you're a musician, you don't really realize how you're improving day by day. But if you spend every single day with your instrument, hours a day, over time, you can't help but get better. And I remember playing with a band after the tour was over, and I had played with this band before the tour, and all of a sudden I'm thinking, how come you guys suck now? It's like my ears really got attuned to the groove, and when things are flamming and things are not locked, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard, which I didn't hear before.
Mm. So at that point, you had enough experience to feel good about yourself. So I guess 'cause that lends itself, and it's just odd that we still ask these kind of questions all these years later about female guitarists. That's why I avoided that word, guitarist ever. It doesn't have to be female, male, whatever. But at that time, were you thinking, how much can I do as a female guitarist? Because there were people that you can look up to at that time. It wasn't like it was new, but you still had you had to blaze a trail that people are still following today. So I guess, did you foresee how far your career could go as a female guitarist before Michael Jackson even?
I honestly didn't think much about it. And when I went to Musicians Institute, which was the third class they ever had, and it was just GIT at the time, there was no bass and drums. I was shocked at day one to find I was the only female in the entire school. There was 59 guys and me. And that was kind of the first time in my life I go, oh, is this not a common career choice? Um, and I played with a bunch of bands, and bands wouldn't hire me if they had a problem with females. And I do recall when I moved to LA, my dad, I went to GIT, then I moved back to San Diego, and several years later moved back to LA. So my dad gave me a loan to get started. And I remember the very last audition I did before I knew, okay, I got to get a day job, was this band. I put a lot of effort into learning their tunes. And, after the audition, the guy goes, "Yeah, that was really good, but we always have trouble with chicks." And I go, "You bastard, time waster." And so I go off to do a day job for the next, I don't know, year or so. And then I get the Michael Jackson gig. So it's just like me.
The ultimate middle finger. Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, it's still so off balance, but and at that time I thought, okay, the revolution has begun. I'm on the biggest tour on planet Earth. Wendy and Lisa had already played with Prince, and Billy Idol, female in the videos playing keyboards, and I thought things would really change. And then 15 years go by and there's nothing. But once high-speed internet became a thing in everybody's home and people could see each other, I'd say often there's not a month that goes by that I don't get turned on to some 7-year-old girl in Indonesia that can kick my ass, because it's when you have access to seeing anybody on earth and you can slow it down down and see where their fingers are and what string they're picking on. I would have given anything to have that when I was a teenager. I
Mm.
just had the local music store guys. In fact, I flunked the test to get into GIT because although I had been taking lessons since I was 8, I didn't know a diatonic scale. I didn't know a chord scale, harmonic minor. And I had to go study with this jazz player, Peter Sprague, in San Diego to get up to speed so I could get in the school.
What you would have went so viral so often if they had the internet back then, just not just with your guitar playing, because that's a very cool thing that I've noticed. You go on Instagram and especially female, just like shredding. So there's just, it's a common thing now.
Yeah.
But the way you also you dressed on stage was something, I see people try to act dressed risque now, and I kind of laugh. I'm like, if you can go on YouTube now and you see some of the stuff that you come out with on the Dangerous tour, I guess how did that start? Because that wasn't very common to come out looking like a neon tree or just some giant anime character. Your hair, obviously, hitting taller than some skyscrapers. You know, how did
Actually,
that come about?
the wardrobe people had to talk with me to see what I was comfortable with, and I was not up for being risque. I was there to play guitar. Some of the videos now look like soft porn. I mean, so even the Super Bowl, asses in the air. Really? Do we really need this to have the 6-year-olds in the audience seeing this crap? And I think it really takes away from any potential respect you could get as a female player. And some girls are out there really working it, and I'm sure it gets them a ton of fans, but that's just not my thing. I had different costumes every time, and the history tour was that was just vile. It was just honestly that costume. I had a leather mask that went across my nose and under my chin, and blah blah blah. Had a wig attached to it, which was a benefit because instead of take 2.5 hours to get my hair up there, it was just slam on a wig and you're good to go.
Okay.
But that actually, the idea for that look actually came from a S&M book that somebody gave Michael. And the original painting had a ball gag in the mouth. And I'm looking at this going, no. Can somebody send a message to Michael that I don't want to be drooling on my guitar neck and destroying my teeth? He was totally fine with it. He just wanted something that looked kind of hard. And I realized too, being part of those tours, it's not just playing music, it's theater. Music is
Yes.
just the foundation. Then you put the lasers, the smoke, the pyro, the bombs, the videos, and whatever else you can think of on top of that. So once I get that in my mind, I go, okay, well, I'm a theater character now.
That's how I looked at it. And that's how I looked at your performance. And it was a theater. You're coming out like it's almost circus like, in with acrobats and everything. It's like yeah, maybe I thought I was a little conservative, but I'm not into shaking. I mean, if you want to shake your ass, that's fine. But it's not what I gravitate towards. I gravitate towards musicianship. And then again, on top of that, there's so many things to look at the same time where, it's your costumes, it's your hair, it's your style, it's all these different things that it would have been interesting if they had the internet that had existed in the early 90s. But from what we can tell from videos, that thankfully we do have them, and they were people with camcorders at that time
Yeah.
filming. Do you go back and ever watch your old performances, or is that difficult for you to do?
I tend to look forward. The only time I see the old stuff is when people send me stuff. Like every Super Bowl, people send me videos of my performance, like I haven't seen it before. So yeah, I don't. I think the last time I saw a whole concert was before they released the Bad 25 video, and Sony invited everybody from the band down to the studio before they released it to have a look at the video, and it was so cool because I hadn't seen the guys for quite a while, and man, Michael was on fire. He was just ridiculous. I mean, because none of us had seen that in years, and all of a sudden it's in our face, and we're just reminded what a badass he was. I mean, even I'm working with a lot of impersonators right now, and all of them would just die to do every move that Michael did with the intensity that he did. And I know, I'm not sure about the Dangerous tour, but I know in the History tour they had oxygen in his tent, and he would take breaks and huff oxygen just so he could get through a 2.5 hour show with those moves. It was crazy.
Before I get to the Michael performances, because I fell in love with rock. I mean, Michael Jackson. We'll talk about that because I looked at him as like almost like my first rock star because of you and the songs that with Eddie Van Halen
Mm.
and the like. But while we are kind of touching on the Super Bowl, I watched it. I'm an American. We watched. That's kind of like it's like a holiday. I think the day after is officially a holiday now. My Giants are terrible. I had no rooting interest in the game. At least I've seen them win in my lifetime. And with the halftime, it wasn't it's not my thing. I'm not even like an Eminem guy. Some people just think like, really, given maybe my age, because he was big and when I was in high school, and it's just not my thing. But I respected the performances. I thought everyone did cool. I love Snoop. Dre is cool, but I'm not gonna dislike something because it's not my genre.
Hmm.
That being said, I guess is that something that you watch, whether it's this year and your opinion on this year, if you can, if you did watch, and do you go out of your way to watch the halftime, knowing that you are a part of that? One of if not the best halftime show of all time. Is that on your radar?
That's I don't watch the football, so I watched the halftime after the fact. In fact, I watched it on my phone, which performers would be horrified. When I have a big screen, I actually watched it in bed on my phone with.
A lot of us do.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I thought it was a pretty amazing production, and God, they must have had at least 100 cameras, and I was thinking of what went into that building, that giant stage, which was a hell of a lot bigger than what we had for sure. And I can't imagine what it took to get it out on the field. Because with ours, our stage was maybe in 5 parts, and everything was on wheels, and they would rehearse it by. My memory is doing like a race gun, like pop, and everybody runs with their pieces of the stage, not the band, but whoever they had do that. Then you got to connect the pieces of the stage during a Lay's potato chip commercial and have it ready to go because everything's live. They can't screw up at all. So what they had, I imagine they had to pull that in on a semi, I would think. That was just like bringing in a small city. So that production was phenomenal, really. And there was some good music in it.
Yeah, it was. There were Super Bowls, and I'm not going to go that route of like, what Super Bowl did you dislike? That's like a thing every year. It's like with the commercials. But when you think back to yours, again, like with Prince, Michael Jackson, those are like the the examples of like this is what these are the top. Like, is
Yeah.
there a moment? And I'm sure you've been asked this, but is there a moment that sticks out, or maybe something that surprised you during that experience? Because I think it would be overwhelming. But
Yeah,
I
everything
right?
surprised me. We were so compartmentalized. I didn't know what was going to happen outside of my own performance.
Huh.
The band performed. We rehearsed the medleys and whatever, but I didn't know that there was going to be the beginning of the show would have an impersonator popping out of the scoreboard, and then another one on the other side of the field popping out in smoke. And so if you see the very beginning of it, where you see Michael and you see the scoreboard, you see me going like this, like what the fuck is and then at the end with the heal the world, or we are the world, whatever they did, the kids with the cards that came out to form pictures. I had no idea that was going to happen. So it was really fun. It was one of the most fun things because I knew it was only going to happen once, and I knew it was aired to a lot of people, though I didn't know it was 80 nations would be checking in live because that was before you could record
I'm
TV.
obviously the Super Bowl is a different animal, but on a night to night basis with Michael, how much of it was guesswork? Did you always go into it? Like, was there anything that you didn't expect, or did you just know this is the set list? This is where I need to stand?
Oh,
Were there
it had
surprises?
it had to be so worked out because of pyro cues, which are very dangerous. You
Yeah.
can't have people just wandering into the pyro thing like Metallica.
Yeah.
There was specific costume changes that had to happen. So yeah, it was the same set list every single night. Um, I was one of the lucky ones. Depending on what tour it was, I got to improvise a bit. But other than that, it was about parts and groove and timing, and just we rehearsed more than I've ever rehearsed with any band in my life before or since. So I'd never played for more than generally a few hundred people, and at the most, a festival maybe 1,500. And all of a sudden, I'm going to be playing with 50,000, 50,000 people, up to 120,000 in Liverpool, open field. And so opening night, it was in Tokyo, and I remember being, anxious because I didn't know how I would feel. I knew I put in the time for rehearsal, and I felt confident about the tunes, but I think any performer has experienced, everything's going great in rehearsal, and all of a sudden you're on the show and things aren't sounding the same, or, when the lights are in your eyes or something can be distracting to make you screw up. But I was really delighted with the first show that once they counted it off, it was just like being at rehearsal because we had done so many repetitions of all the songs in the same order for 2 months straight.
Did Michael have advice for you? Like, how closely did you guys work together? In addition to, you got to work with the band and, of course, the staging, and you mentioned the pyro. Of course, we all know the Metallica incident that happened.
Yeah.
But I get, because obviously you followed him. It wasn't just a one tour. Was there something maybe you bonded over, or was it just all music?
It was all music, really. I mean, during rehearsals for the bad tours, the most time we had to spend with him. Once we were on the road, there was 100 people in the entourage. We took up 3 different hotels, and there wasn't a lot of hang time. We would all all the performers would get together with him before the show and just kind of have a group prayer and let's do this kind of thing. Um, Mostly information would come through Greg Fillinganes. So he was the musical director, and Michael, I think he filmed every rehearsal and watched them at night, which that's a lot. When I finish a rehearsal, I don't want to hear music. I don't want to play music. I'm just burnt. So he was as professional as they come. So if he saw something in the recording that he wanted changed, he would call Greg, and then Greg would work us the next day before Michael showed up to change what he wanted changed. So there wasn't a lot. There were a few things in the moment where I was really happy to be playing with him. I was having a blast, and I was smiling all the time. So I'd be smiling while I'm playing the Beat It solo, and he didn't like that. He wanted me to snarl because it's a nasty song about fighting. So, just a few small things like that he asked for. That's it.
Okay. I always just wonder if it's something like nobody knows, like a sense of humor, or you bonded over, I don't know, if a movie or something like that. Something that we all could identify with, in addition to just the major stuff like music. So that's why, I kind of always ask if there's something that you bond over. But you mentioned how everything is regimented, but I was listening to an interview you did a couple years ago with Natternet. They do a lot of stuff about Buckethead, and they were talking to you a little bit about Slash when he came out on that
Yeah.
Dangerous tour. And for me, I didn't even know how to process that as a young kid, because I'm growing up. I love Michael Jackson. Yeah, he's the king of pop, but I was like, he's such a rock and roll guy, and he's all over. And then like here's this Guns N' Roses music where I was still maybe too young to get into at that
Yeah.
time. I think it was not as kid friendly at that time in my life.
Yeah.
But just to have Slash and Michael Jackson, those two worlds collide. But in the interview, you said you weren't expecting that. You didn't know Slash was going to show up and do these shows?
No, like I said, we're compartmentalized. We know our thing. And I showed up to a gig somewhere in Spain, and I walked past the area where our guitars were, and there was a whole bunch of Les Pauls, and neither of us played Les Pauls. I go, what the hell's going on? So somebody told me that Slash will be sitting in that night, and Michael brought Slash and I into his tent to discuss basically the stage moves. We did Black and White together, and it was hilarious because it's one thing to comprehend the moves by here's what we're going to do, but we didn't go over it physically. So we're on the stage, and there was one point where both of us, Slash and I, were supposed to run to the stage left front where the fans are. You see the fans blowing his hair behind there.
Yeah, if you're watching
My
right
my hair was not going to move.
now.
He eventually did make it over there, but he he was like planted in the middle of the stage. So I grabbed his arm to kind of remind him that we need to move now for the bridge or something. And it was like trying to pull a tree. That guy was planted. You know, it was such a strange experience, but I think eventually he migrated over there. And I will tell you, I headbanged so hard during that song, my neck hurt for a week. Because normally I would only go up for, I don't know, 8, 16 bars for certain things, and I'm back in my position. The front stage was mainly for Michael and the dancers, and there's almost a whole separate stage for the musicians.
What did you know of Guns N' Roses at that time? Because the Dangerous Tour was what, 91, 92? And that's
Yeah,
when Use Your Illusion came out, and they're the biggest band in the world.
yeah, they were
Michael
huge.
Jackson's the biggest artist in the world. So, I mean,
Yeah.
what did you know? Or are you just compartmentalizing and you're just in your own touring world? Like, are you aware of what Guns N' Roses is doing at that time?
Oh, sure, very aware. Yeah, MTV was huge at the time, so I knew. I think I might have even still listened to the radio back then. Yeah, I was well aware. I was a fan of the first record, Paradise City and Jungle. I thought they were great.
Okay. I guess then how did you talk about Appetite for Destruction, that's obviously where I get the name of this pod, Appetite for Distortion,
Yeah.
to state the obvious. So you're establishing your name in the 80s, and then in the 90s with Michael Jackson, and there's still this term hair metal, and you have the hair to win them all. So I guess what were your thoughts on that scene? And then when Guns N' Roses came in with Appetite for Destruction, like, did you see that as different? I guess, how did you view that scene? And I guess GNR in general when they broke in 1987.
Yeah, well, I felt like I was part of that scene. I up until I got the Jackson gig, I was in 5 different bands, and one of them was doing. Um, we didn't do Guns covers, but we did Dokken covers and stuff of that genre. So I was just into playing. I had one band that was kind of like the Chili Peppers with the punk funk because nobody could sing. Just rapped, and I just wanted to play. I was open to anything at that point.
Okay, cool. So after that thing with Slash, I guess what's going through your mind though there, where I guess I only think I have to compare it to myself. If I were you threatened by that, or did you just say like, "Oh, here's a moment like where Slash is going to play with us"? Like, what did you talk about with Michael, maybe like, and Slash, like after the fact? Because it was a few shows. It wasn't just one.
No, it was just one.
Oh, it
Yeah.
was just one. Okay.
Right. Yeah, we had Steve Stevens come out on the Bad tour for 3 nights in New York, but Slash was just the one and gone. And Michael and I never talked about it after the fact.
Okay. You know what? Then I'm thinking of, because I've become friendly with a former GNR manager, Doug Goldstein, who was their manager at that time, and he tells a story, and you may not know anything about it. That he believes when Slash left to go play with Michael, they were on tour with Use Your Illusion, and Slash was like, "Bye, I'm going to go play with Michael Jackson for 3 days." That's where the multiple dates comes into mind. But it was, yeah, right, one show. And what he believes, that Axl was upset about that because of, we're not going to go down the route of Michael's allegations, but I mean that's what Axl believed, and Slash didn't care. He's like, I'm going to go play with Michael. And then Doug has told the story, as my fiance just texted me. She's flying home from she went to go to Mexico to see Dave Matthews. So that's what.
Wow, that's dedication.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, I very professional as I left my phone not on vibrate, which you always do. But Doug offered. The story goes, like, I offered, like, yeah, if you're gonna go do this, let me at least negotiate your deal. Like, are you gonna get anything close to the $1 million that Eddie Van Halen got? He's like, no, I already negotiated my deal. Michael sent a big screen TV to my house. And Doug's like, that's it? You just got a TV out of it? Yep. So I don't know. Like, have you heard that story? Do you know anything about You know?
Well, I'll back up to the Eddie thing. He didn't get any money for doing Beat It. He did it as a favor.
Okay.
Yeah, I know he sat in with them, and I doubt he got paid for that either. But I mean, you got to consider that publicity is worth. You can't pay enough money to get publicity like that. Slash sits in with Michael Jackson is going to be in every newspaper in Europe and around the world.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. Another mysterious, I don't know. I was trying to think of a better segue, but I'll just ask about Buckethead instead. Because he lists you as one of your, he has listed you as one of like his influences. And then as I'm like researching, going back and watching your videos and with you in the costumes, like if you could talk about like, was he inspired by the playings and the costumes? And did you ever remember what he sent you in that love letter that apparently he sent you as a young Bucket?
Young Bucket. I hope I run into him again so we can talk about this. But it was the sweetest letter ever. I hope I still have it. I've got like 20 scrapbooks in my closet. But he listed the reasons that we would make a good couple.
Right, that's
I
what it
had
was.
a Westie breed dog, and his mother bred Westies. That was one of them. And obviously, we would both play guitar, and there's 5 or 6 things that would make sense that we would be a couple, but that did not happen. I think he was 16 at the time, and he had sent me. He did kind of a spoof on a guitar instruction video, and he sent me that with the bucket on his head, and who knew he would go on to record and get millions of fans.
What do you think about, I guess, Buckethead in general? Because I didn't know about him until he joined Guns N' Roses, and I'm a forever fan. I thankfully got to see him at least play once live because I know he doesn't always tour. He played BB King's Blues Club in New York City before it closed down, and
Hmm.
I'm just like I'm in awe of his playing and the gimmick and the passing out the toys and the nunchucks. So I guess what did you like? Is there a way to describe Buckethead for those who don't? I mean, people who listen to this podcast know who he is, but
Yeah.
I
I'd just say he's a super creative guy. He's done some really off the wall things, and it just makes it really interesting. It's not the standard, okay, here's another Steve Vai guy. You know, he's got his own bag happening.
did you ever listen to his work with GNR and Chinese Democracy out of curiosity?
Yeah, I'm sure I listened to that, but I got too many memories in the gray matter to even recall that right now.
Is that going to be the title of your next book? Too many memories in the gray matter.
Yeah, I actually started writing a book after Michael passed because there were so many books coming out that were just salacious, and none of these people even knew Michael. So I started writing a book of this is what it was like to actually tour with him. And because there was nothing salacious in it, everybody passed on it. So there you go.
Ooh, that hurts I think that hurts a lot of like, as a Michael Jackson fan and also as the way I conduct myself because I told you before the interview I'm not a clickbait guy and maybe I would be more popular if I was. But is there I want to hear like what's out there. I mean, aside from the obvious and whatever, like what do you feel about like what do you feel comfortable sharing that we don't know about Michael Jackson that we should know about him? Is there anything?
Uh, just that he was extremely respectful. A lot of times you hear stories about huge acts that are just a-holes to their band. You guys sleep on the bus and I get the 5-star hotel. Or there's certain people that are notorious for yelling at people on stage, or even Prince. When somebody made a mistake, he'd pull the James Brown thing, like he would fine you. You made a mistake on this song, so you owe me $500 kind of thing. And Michael wasn't like that at all. That was not his upbringing. He was always very respectful to everyone and appreciated us. So it was really wonderful. Um, I got all these memories trying to collide at once, and you're asking me about a while back about something that happened on the tour, and I remember we were I think it might have been, it was the Dangerous tour, rehearsals, and they were working on something new. They called it the cherry picker, where there was this big mechanical arm that would go out over the audience, and he'd be on top of them with this cape blowing in the wind. And we were rehearsing it, and the arm, he's out there with the arm, and the arm all of a sudden does this, like it's throw him off. And so he's hanging on to the bars, and all the roadies are on their radios, like, "Oh, holy shit, the boss is in trouble! Bring the arm back in." And eventually he comes back on the stage and he gets on the mic and he goes, I don't mean to pull rank, but this needs to be fixed. Where somebody that hadn't been in show business since they were 5 years old might have just said, "You're fired. This is wrong, blah." But never saw him lose his shit in 10 years. He just wanted to put on a good show, and he wanted people to have a good time.
It'll always be one of my, I guess, just because of age, regrets is us not seeing him live. And as I mentioned, as far as back as I can remember, I've been listening to Michael Jackson's music, and specifically, there was an Alvin and the Chipmunks VHS I used to watch where they put Alvin in like the Beat It video, and I go back, I still remember it. Then of course, again, I got Dangerous on cassette. I have that somewhere, and watch VHSs of the tour, of his tour and his performances, and still to this day, I'm a fan. But I always was curious because he's obviously the king of pop, but I keep talking about rock and roll. Was there ever a moment that you thought that, yeah, he did the band thing with the Jackson 5, and he was up there with you, and he's just feeling the solos, whether it's Slash or whoever guitars, he really gets into it. Did you ever think that he wanted to form a rock band maybe and do something different than just have Michael Jackson have these songs that have rock elements? Did you ever thought that maybe, hey, if I got Jennifer, if I got this, we can do something different and have a rock band or a rock album? Any vibes like that?
I think he was doing exactly what he wanted to do.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he had the freedom to do whatever he wanted, and so it was such a brilliant move to bring Van Halen into the mix. I mean, it really worked to expand both of their audiences. Huge, the biggest selling record to date at that point. In fact, when Thriller sold 20 million records, I heard the entire Sony offices around the world took 2 weeks off and went to Hawaii. That's how much money was coming in. And then he went on to sell twice that amount, more than twice that amount. So, he wanted music that would reach people. And I think the pop format is what's going to reach a lot further than a narrower format of metal or rock.
I always thought about it like it's not even just it shouldn't be a label. Yeah, pop hits, and we know what translates to radio, but I'm like, he just made great music with great guitars. And but before I guess I would be remiss before I let you go if I didn't ask about Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah.
How did you? I mean, we all took his passing. Me as just a fan, I never got to meet him, but I mean, when did you get a chance to meet him? I read something about like he did something with Michael Jackson and he needed to be reminded about how to play the Beat It solo. Was that the only moment? Did you have any other moments with Eddie, or get any feedback about, your live performances of, his solo?
I met him briefly at a NAMM show, and it was kind of like, I think he felt like an animal in the zoo because people were just staring at him. So that was kind of uncomfortable. But we ended up rehearsing next door to each other in North Hollywood. He must have been checking out some gear because it was just him and his roadie, maybe one more person in his room, and then I had a gig that had been booked before I got the Jackson tour, so we were rehearsing to do that during a break in the Bad tour. And they asked me to come next door and play the Beat It solo, And I went in, and he put his 5150 Strat on me. And anytime I've put a guy's guitar on me, it generally hangs uncomfortably low because I tend to have my guitars up kind of high. And plus his Floyd Rose tremolo bar, he likes that loose, so it's always just gonna swing. And mine, I know exactly where it is. I can push it, and it's gonna stay in that position. So that it was a little bit of a struggle trying to find that. But so I played it for him, and then he picked up the guitar and started learning it, and just going, how's this go? So I gave him a couple tips, but it was the most interesting thing about that was because he never played that with Van Halen. You know, he improvised the stuff, played it, recorded it, and then never thought of it again. So, you know, I wouldn't expect him to know most of it. But even though we were playing the same notes, he was playing a couple things in a very different way. And I was so remorse. I took my video camera to that building the next day, hoping he'd still be there, and he wasn't. And it was long before smartphones, so there's no evidence of it, unfortunately. But and then he came next door, maybe an hour later when my band was playing, and watched us play, and gave me the best compliment I've ever gotten ever, which is nothing I could share with my mother for sure. But he goes, "You're a motherfucker." Oh, man, I'll take that. It was
Was
really
there really sweet? Yeah. I mean, is there with you? I mean, I don't get this impression from you just from talking to you this for 40 minutes or so thus far. That was there any intimidation to meet? Because like you mentioned, everybody's staring at Eddie. Or did you see a colleague, or like, how did you see Eddie Van Halen at that time? Or did you see a peer, or were you intimidated at all that you're playing
oh,
his solo?
um, I'm sure I was really anxious. You know, at first when I showed up and they go, Van Halen next door, he wants you to prove you can play the Beat It solo. I said, no. And actually, to get me over there, they said, "Will you just say hi to him?" And I go, "Well, hell yeah." Um, and once I was there, it's just kind of in the moment, going with the flow. Um, but he's not one of those guys that would sit there going, "Okay, show me what you know." He
For
was,
sure.
you know, it really depends on people's energy. You can feel their energy, and he was just wide open and appreciative. So it was cool.
Well, I mean, I appreciate you sharing that with me and a few stories today. I hope you do get that Michael Jackson book out, because that's at a certain level, not like kind of what I do here. I get these stories from people who really know Axl Rose. Like maybe that's the best example of all these stories out there about him. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm talking to people who literally worked with him and toured with him and spend time with him. And, so I try to get that out. I don't, I try not to buy into some of that stuff that's out there, and just enjoy the music if I'm able to, which thankfully I've been able to, uh, with you, because of you. So with that being said, what do you have going on in the future? What could we look for now from Jennifer Batten? Like anything that's cooking? What can you tell us?
You know, I'm in kind of an odd space right now. I've been touring the planet for like 35 years, and I'm super burnt out. I'm sick of getting on planes, sick of broken guitars and missed connections and canceled flights. And so I started a cover band in Portland a couple years ago, and I'm really working that. I've got also a solo multimedia show where I do originals and kind of original covers in sync with films that I make. And I just launched last summer a duo version of that. So I have a singer with that as well. So I just I want to stay home, and so far it's not working because I'm off to Europe for months. In fact, I'm supposed to play the Kremlin Palace, and now Putin has ruined that. So I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I'm supposed to be in Paris for a couple days. All of a sudden, I've got a lot of Michael Jackson tribute shows that are asking me to play. So I got something in Spain coming up, Mexico, Argentina. There's a Brazilian one that's really good. There is coming to America. I got a few dates this summer, and I've been playing with one in the UK for 4 or 5 years. I'm going back there for a couple weeks. Um, just a little bit of everything. You know, the whole summer is going to be my band playing in Portland, which I'm thrilled about.
And are you still working on? It's supposed to be an all girls fantasy camp, all women fantasy camp. Is that still
Uh,
happening?
you know, that was supposed to happen in January, and Nancy Wilson and Melissa Etheridge decided they didn't want to do it because there was a COVID surge, so that's
Mm.
canceled, and it's moved to Mother's Day but I'm going to be in Europe, so that's not going to happen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that does seem cool because I've been fortunate enough to have had Nancy Wilson on the show and Kathy Valentine from the Go Go's. I think that was she was going to be on it. So hopefully in the future. Oh,
Well, yeah, they said it was their biggest selling camp ever, so they're definitely going to repeat that, I'm sure. Because I think a lot of women just wouldn't feel comfortable being in a mixed camp with a bunch of macho shredder guys. So I think it's probably probably feels a lot safer environment to a lot of people that might sign up. And it's not cheap, man. It's just like 5 grand to get in there.
wow. Well,
Yeah.
I would ask you what keeps you motivated, but I feel like that would be a whole other hour because you seem not to. Yeah, you say you're tired. It doesn't seem to be like you still got a full plate. Is there one
Oh,
specific thing?
no, I'm just tired of traveling
Yeah.
and jet lag and all that. I still get excited with music and every new tune I learn, as long as I like the tune. And for most situations, I'm in control now, so I do like the tunes. I like exploring, seeing what I can do. In my solo show, I do. I'm starting to add a lot more cover songs, like Peter Gabriel's "In Your Eyes," and I'm playing it with harmonics. And I like to explore how I can take a vocal song and kind of bring it alive with the guitar. So, and I'm doing a lot of sessions too. In fact, I got 2 recordings I have to do tonight. So I like variety, fortunately, because
Wow.
you kind of have to as a freelance musician. You just have to do whatever comes in an email.
Wow. I mean, it's really inspiring. I mean, yeah, I'm not a. I wish I had the talent to be a musician or a guitar player. That's why I chose the radio path. But it's really inspiring to see all you've been able to do and accomplish and still going forward and being creative with what you're doing so things aren't getting stale. And I love the fact that you're paying tribute and doing all these Michael Jackson things around the world, keeping his music alive for his millions of fans. So uh Jennifer, thank you so much for your time. It's appreciated, and I hope we get to do this again.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me.